Welcome back, GED scholars, to another Reasoning Through Language Arts exam lesson. And in this lesson, we are continuing on with the concept of how we're creating these sentences that we will use when we are writing our extended writing response, but also how we can identify incorrect sentences when it comes to the multiple choice section of the exam. Remember, folks, when it comes to the RLA exam, yes, you have the extended writing response, you are writing an essay, but that multiple choice section is going to give you passages. And within the passages, there will be incorrect sentences, things that you need to be able to identify as being wrong. And so when you get to the question and they say, hey, in this passage, sentence 2 that you read, how should it be edited in order for it to be correct? Or for sentence 2, we left a blank. Which word should be chosen in order for the sentence to be correct? So you want to make sure that you understand the parts of a sentence. When it comes to those parts, how are they supposed to be presented within the sentence correctly? Things like that. And we've covered verb tenses, so make sure you watch that video if you're just like, I don't know how a noun and a verb are meant to agree. We've talked about the different types of sentences, simple, compound, complex. And in this video, we're going to talk about modifying ideas and parallel structure. And so when we look at modifying ideas, it's a way to make your writing more creative, a way to make writing in general more interesting to read. And parallel structure is going back to the good old English grammar rules of when you have a list of verbs, they need to be in the same format, and that's the same tense. And so keep watching the video, folks, if you're like, I have no idea what you're talking about when it comes to modifying ideas, but if you're like, what is parallel structure? It's easy, folks. This is a short video. Once you see examples, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about. So let's go ahead and get started on this lesson. So first up, let's talk about modifiers, folks. And modifiers are words and phrases used to add descriptive details. And if you're like, what does this matter? Once again, folks, as I just mentioned in our introduction, you're going to be asked within the multiple choice section of the RLA exam to eliminate misplaced modifiers and dangling modifiers as well. And we're going to look at both of these. We're going to look at examples so you have a better understanding of what they mean when they say misplaced modifiers and dangling modifiers. But once again, modifiers are words and phrases. They're going to add descriptive details. And this is when we talk about, well, adding modifiers makes the reading clearer. It's more interesting. It's because you're going to use adjectives and adverbs. You are going to use these words, these single words, to make the writing more interesting, to make it clearer. But we're also going to see how modifiers can be phrases too. So for example, and this is our first example of many that we're about to look at when it comes to modifiers, you could have the sentence, my children went to the store yesterday along with me. So this word yesterday is the misplaced modifier. This word yesterday, we don't need it within the sentence in order for the sentence to make sense. We could say my children went to the store along with me. Sure, that's perfectly fine. But the thing is once again, the modifier, whether it's a phrase or it's a word, is going to give more information to the reader. It's going to make it clear to them what's going on. What is the message you're trying to send when you wrote this sentence? So in order to correct it, as we can see from the second sentence down here, we're just going to move that word yesterday to its right place. Because remember, the first example, it was misplaced, so let's move it to the correct place. So when it comes to modifiers, the modifier needs to be as close as it possibly can to whatever it is it's describing. If it's an adjective and it's describing a noun, it needs to be close to the noun. If it's an adverb, it's describing the verb, it needs to be close to the verb. Well, yesterday is not describing the children. It's not describing me, who I'm assuming is the parent because it says my children, but it's just talking about a time when this happened. So I don't need yesterday to be close to my children or I. It just needs to be not close to that. So that's why we see the sentence that is correct reads, my children and I went to the store. You could have put a period at the end there, perfectly fine. But once again, this yesterday is just giving the reader some more information. So my children and I went to the store yesterday. That is where this modifier that's just talking about time, that's all it's doing. It's not an adjective or adverb, is being placed at the end of the sentence. If you're like, well, could I say yesterday my children and I went to the store? Absolutely. You just have to make sure that if you start your sentence with yesterday, you have to follow it with a comma, and then you can say my children and I went to the store. So let's look at when a sentence has a modifier and it is misplaced. And we saw that with the first example when we looked at the word yesterday that was being placed right in the middle of the sentence and we just moved it to the end. Well, with this example that we're using, it's once again a word that is misplaced, but the thing is that we're not going to just move it to the beginning or the end. So as you can see, the sentence reads, on her way home, Jane found a gold man's watch. This adjective gold that is meant to describe the watch is misplaced, and in turn, when you read the sentence, it sounds as though she found a gold man, which we know she didn't find a gold man. She found a gold watch that happens to be a watch that a man would wear. So this adjective, this word gold, is misplaced. And when we look at the second sentence, the way we're going to correct the misplaced adjective, gold, it makes more sense. On her way home, Jane found a man's gold watch because the gold is meant to be next to watch. Remember, when you modify ideas, you want to make sure the adjective, the adverb, is placed as close to the noun or the verb that it's describing. When you move it away, that's when the sentence is misleading and your reader's like, wait, you found a gold man or did you find a gold watch that happens to be a man's watch? And once again, folks, when we look at the second sentence, we don't even need to include gold for the sentence to be good. On her way home, Jane found a man's watch. Perfect. That is a good sentence. But when we add modifiers, it's giving more information to the reader. So here's another example of a misplaced modifier. Once again, we see an adjective. The child ate a cold dish of cereal this morning. Okay, well, cold is right next to the word dish. So our reader is going to misinterpret that this child is sitting there eating a cold dish. Like somebody took a dish out of the freezer and said, here you go, child, here's a cold dish. And then, of course, we see of cereal this morning. But once again, folks, when you place your adjectives or adverbs next to an incorrect word, which means you're not placing it next to the noun that it's actually describing or the verb that it's actually describing, it becomes a somewhat confusing sentence. The child ate a cold dish of cereal this morning. Sounds interesting. When in reality, the writer is trying to tell us the child ate a dish of cold cereal. Cold is meant to describe the cereal, not the dish, folks. And that's why it's important that when you write your sentences, when it comes to the extended writing response, your adjectives, your adverbs are close to the noun or the verb that they are meant to describe and not anywhere else. Because when it happens, folks, like you see up here with the example, the incorrect example, cold is next to dish, and that's not what it's meant to describe. It's meant to describe the cereal. So let's look at an example of a misplaced modifier when that misplaced modifier is an adverb. And remember, folks, adverbs are describing the verb. We've looked at a few examples already of adjectives being misplaced, but this one is talking about adverbs. So let's look at the example. We ate the lunch that we had brought slowly. Slowly is going to be my adverb. And remember, folks, if you're like, how do I know it's an adverb? Adverbs have a tendency to end in ly. So what is this adverb slowly describing? Is it how they brought their lunch, or is it meant to describe how they ate their lunch? Well, like I said, slowly is an adverb. It describes the verb. And it's not the verb had brought, because yes, had brought is a verb to bring something, but it's meant to describe how the food was eaten. So slowly is meant to be close to ate. That's why when we look at the correction, we have slowly next to the verb it's meant to modify and not next to any other verb, like the verb had brought. So the correction is we slowly ate the lunch that we had brought. So once again, we have this adverb slowly. We know it's an adverb because it ends in an ly. And we just need to make sure that when we introduce the adverb, it's next to the verb that it's describing and not any other verb. So we also have dangling modifiers that are phrases, not just simple words like an adjective or an adverb. So when we have dangling modifiers that are phrases, we notice right here that it's at the beginning or end of the sentence. it doesn't have a clear subject, which is why it makes the sentence kind of confusing for folks when they read it. And it usually can't be fixed by moving it, the way we saw when it came to an adjective or an adverb, where I was like, hey, just make sure your adjectives are close to the nouns that they're describing and your adverbs are close to the verb that it's meant to describe. You can't really do that with the phrases that are considered dangling modifiers, because what happens is, as you can see from the first example, you'll have information. And what we see here, this first one, driving the truck, we have the verb right here, driving, but we don't know who's driving, which means that it's missing its noun. So the sentence reads, driving the truck, one of the boxes fell. And I have the question right here, well, who was driving the truck? Because like I said, folks, we have the verb, but where is its noun? The second example that you see right here, we have parked in a tow zone. A police officer gave us a ticket. We have our verb right here, parked, but where is the noun that is completing this verb? For the first example, same question. Where is the noun that is completing the verb driving? Because if we don't have anybody or a subject, a noun driving the truck, it sounds like it was one of the boxes that was driving, right? Read it. Driving the truck, one of the boxes fell. Well, one of the boxes is not the subject or not the noun that is completing the verb of driving. Driving the truck is a misplaced modifier. The second sentence, parked in a tow zone, a police officer gave us a ticket. The police officer is not the one that's parked in the tow zone, but without a subject, without a noun to let us know who's completing these verbs, we're scratching our heads thinking, what's going on with these sentences? What's going on with these dangling modifiers that were introduced to us? And now the message of the sentence is totally messed up. And if you're wondering, well, how would I fix this type of dangling modifier? You need to introduce the noun, folks. You need to introduce the subject. So for this first one that we see, driving the truck, one of the boxes fell. I could go ahead and let me clear some space so I can write this for us. I can go ahead and say, while we were driving the truck, one of the boxes fell. You no longer have a dangling modifier. And what we did is we introduced the subject. We are the subject. We are doing the driving. So while we were driving the truck, one of the boxes fell. So same concept with the second sentence that we see down here, parked in a tow zone, a police officer gave us a ticket. How do I fix it? Introduce the subject, introduce that noun that is going to be taking care of the verb, which is parked. While I was parked in a tow zone, a police officer gave, and it should be while we, because we have us right here. So I actually should rewrite that, folks, and I'm going to do that while we're here. I'm not going to stop the video because that's something that you want to make sure you pay attention to. If you have a plural pronoun already in your sentence, like we do here, us is plural, when I rewrite or when I correct this dangling modifier, I need to make sure I'm using plural as well. So while we, and let's go ahead and get rid of that verb was, because that has to change to while we were parked in a tow zone, a police officer gave us a ticket. So hopefully that makes sense as how you correct dangling modifiers that are phrases. You have to introduce the subject, the noun. Remember, subject, noun are the same thing. That is going to complete the verb. You might have noticed too that when we were correcting the sentences, the dangling modifiers, we ended up writing subordinating clauses. And for those of you who are like, what's a subordinating clause? Subordinating clauses are dependent clauses. They cannot stand on their own, and therefore they need an independent clause to follow. So you can't just write while we were driving the truck, period. That is a sentence fragment that will get points knocked off for it. That is incorrect. You can't just write while we were parked in a tow zone, period. That is once again a sentence fragment. Dependent clauses require an independent clause too. And what we see when we have dependent plus independent clauses, we get those complex sentences that we talked about in the other video, where we talked about the simple sentence, compound sentence, and complex sentences as well. So hopefully, folks, as far as modifiers are concerned, you have a better understanding of what could be a modifier. It could be one word, an adjective or an adverb, or it could be a phrase. And then you just have to make sure you introduce the subject or noun to take care of, well, who's completing that verb. Next up, let's talk about parallel structure. And so as you can see, you will be asked to edit sentences for parallel structure. And remember, folks, when you're writing your essay, that extended writing response, you want to make sure you're writing well. And parallel structure is part of writing well. And so what this means is that parallel structure is referring to elements in a list, and those elements in that list must be in the same grammatical form. So let's look at our example really quickly. So the first one reads, Jim wants to eat less, exercise more, and be getting more sleep. And when you hear that, especially the part where it says be getting, there should be red flags popping up in your mind because you might be thinking, well, the other verbs, eat, exercise, are in that present tense. Versus when we read be getting, we see the ending ing, and that is the progressive ending. So when we correct it, we just need to make sure that we change this verb to look like the other two verbs. So the correction will read, Jim wants to eat less, exercise more, and get more sleep. Let's look at some examples though. So this first one reads, walking and to swim are good aerobic exercises. Okay, so obviously if you hear it and it's incorrect, folks. But this is the thing. And I know that you're like, well, when I study, I read things out loud, and that's perfectly fine as long as you're mindful, because when it comes to test time, you cannot read out loud. If you're like, well, I'm going to test at home, they won't hear me, I'll go on mute. Folks, that's not how it works. If they even see your lips moving when you are taking the exam remotely, they think you're cheating. So you can't even do that. Okay. So yes, while you practice and while obviously you're watching the video, you hear me speaking, that's okay. But when it comes to test time, silence, folks. But let's get back to the incorrect sentence. So walking is a verb and it is in the progressive form because it ends in an ing. To swim is a verb, but it is just the present tense of swim. And it's, there's no tense happening here that matches the progressive. So in order to fix it, we would change which one? You could say to walk and to swim are good aerobic exercises, sure. But when it comes to how people read sentences, let alone how we speak, you most likely will change to swim to swimming. So you would say walking and swimming are good aerobic exercises. Let's look at the second example right here. Try to lose weight slowly, sensibly, and be careful. That's interesting because we start off by introducing adverbs. And how do we know it's an adverb, folks? Because it ends in an ly. Remember, most adverbs end in ly. Not all of them, but most of them do. We have another adverb, sensibly. And what are these adverbs of? What are they helping describe? They're helping to describe the verb to lose. Okay, so they're saying, hey, if you're going to be doing this losing of weight, but definitely talking about the verb itself to lose, you want to do it slowly, sensibly, and be careful. That is not parallel. If we have adverb that ends in ly here, adverb that ends in ly here, then this needs to be an adverb that ends in ly. So we wouldn't say and be careful, we would say what? We would say carefully. And so when we change it to carefully, the sentence reads a lot smoother. Try to lose weight slowly, sensibly, and carefully. Let's look at the third example. So the third one reads, Jim went to the store, bought an exercise mat, and is doing exercises. And if you're like, well, that sounds right. I know that it sounds okay, but when it comes to English grammar, and remember, folks, that's a part of the RLA exam that you're going to be tested on. You want to make sure you have parallel structure. So once again, we see the verb tense, the progressive verb tense in doing it, ing. So we need to decide, okay, well, how can we change this last one in order for the sentence to be parallel? So we could say, Jim went to the store, bought an exercise mat, and does exercises. And if you're like, well, that sounds weird. If you're writing the sentence and you're like, I don't like using does, what's another way you can say this phrase without losing meaning about the doing exercises? You could say and completes exercises. What you just want to make sure you're paying attention to, folks, is that you don't introduce a different tense of a verb when in the other portions of your sentence where you're listing things out, you're just using the same verb tense. Bought, went. This is the present tense. Doing is progressive tense. Does is present tense. Does matches both went and bought. And if you're like, lady, that's a lot. I don't understand what you're talking about when you're saying like verb tenses. Please make sure you watch the video where we describe the different verb tenses. It's in the video that we discuss noun and verb agreements. We talk about the simple tense, the progressive tense, and the perfect tense as well. So just make sure you pay attention to that because it'll really help you when it comes to the section on the exam where they're asking you questions about parallel structure and when it comes to writing your extended writing response. So let's look at this last example here. It reads, avoid exercising on busy streets, near street jams, polluted areas. That doesn't even make sense. Yes, we are listing things, but when we get to the third one, we're missing something that the other two portions have when they're being listed. Can you see what it's missing? If you're like, it's missing a preposition, absolutely, folks. Good eye. You'll notice here that the sentence reads, avoid exercising on busy streets near traffic jams. And then it's missing what would be the preposition that we would introduce here. Well, polluted areas, you could be in a polluted area. So avoid exercising on busy streets near traffic jams in polluted areas. And I would even actually say you want to introduce a coordinating conjunction. So I would even put and in polluted areas. And if you're like, I still am stuck, what is on, what is near, what is in? These are all considered prepositions. Prepositions are words that let the reader know that there is a relationship between nouns. And prepositions are one of the 8 parts of speech. When it comes to parallel structure, you might see prepositions and you need to make sure that the parts of the sentence, the things that you are listing, the elements, have that parallel structure, even when it comes to prepositions. Thanks for watching, folks. Hopefully you have a better idea of what it means when we talk about modifying ideas and what it means when we talk about parallel structure. Please remember that not only will you have a multiple choice section for the RLA exam, but you are going to have an extended writing response. So this information is not only good to know for when it comes to the multiple choice section, but when it comes to you writing your essay, you need to make sure that you understand how to write correctly using American English grammar. Don't forget to use technology wisely when you're studying for the exams, whether it's the RLA exam, math, science, or social studies exams. Thanks for watching, GED scholars. You know what you're doing. Keep your head up. You've got this.